What I'll do is I'll make this into a. That works?
Great. Yeah, yeah. Oh, awesome. So good afternoon, everyone. For those who I have not met, my name is Yen Tang. I am the Director of Outreach for the Office of Digital Services and Solutions in the Georgia Technology Authority. So I want to welcome everyone to this month's AI Advisory Council meeting. Thank you to to everyone here, to our council members, to our special guest, Dr. Catharyn Baird, who will be speaking on our ethics guide, and to everyone who's registered and has taken the time to join us today. So welcome you all. I want to first go over our agenda, and then we can get started on the meat of the meeting. So we're going to have a special welcome from our state CIO. Nikhil will go over the state of Georgia, the AI program at a high level, and then some advisory council, and then just a little more information about advisory council for those who are joining us who have registered. And then we're going to go over just a lot of a few updates on the innovation lab. So the current build out, the procurement, and the current partnerships that we have with who we're working with. And then we'll go over the working groups, and that's for our council members of the next steps of what we're going to be doing. And within that, we'll have hear from Dr. Procter and Dr. Baird on the ethics DNA. And then at the end, we'll open it up for discussion. Those in our audience, if you have any questions, please use our Q&A box or use the chat. I believe I've turned it on right so that you can use it. So we'll be glad to take any questions at the end. So with that, I think we can, let's hear from our state CIO, Georgia State CIO, and the Executive Director of the Georgia Technology Authority, Shanzia Thomas. Good afternoon, Shanzia.
Welcome all, and thank you all for attending today's public meeting for the Georgia AI Advisory Council. It is my honor to address such a distinguished group dedicated to advancing the role of artificial intelligence in our state. The Georgia Technology Authority, with support from Governor Kemp's office, leads our state's AI program. The governor's commitment to technological innovation ensures that our efforts align with the goals of enhancing public service and augmenting the state's workforce with emerging technologies. Today, we're joined by experts in technology, policy, and industry. Your insights are crucial as we navigate the opportunities and challenges presented by AI. Our aim is to harness AI power of efficiency while addressing ethical considerations and ensuring equitable deployment. The GTA fosters collaboration between public agencies, private sector partners, and academic institutions to position Georgia as a leader in AI innovation. Thank you for your dedication and for being here today. And now I will turn it back over to Yen to get the program started.
Great. Thank you, Shanzia. I'm going to I think Nikhil is up with details on our AI program.
Sounds good. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in, for everyone who is here and anyone who will be watching this recording after. I'm Nikhil Deshpande. I'm the Chief Digital and AI Officer with the Georgia Technology Authority in the state of Georgia. My honor and privilege to talk about the Georgia AI program. This program, with the direction of Director Thomas and the governor's office, was put in place last year around September. And the focus of this program really is it's a three-pronged approach. One is to establish a comprehensive AI governance framework, as all we can attest that with the pace that AI is changing and going places, we want to make sure we have a very robust governance framework put in place so that our sister agencies, our vendor partners can adhere to and comply with certain guidelines and guardrails that we put in place as part of this framework. The next part is going to be a tactical way of creating an innovation lab, a central hub for AI research and development. This will be a hybrid workspace for our state agencies and also our private sector partners to collaborate and work on emerging ideas to make sure that we are either, as Director Thomas mentioned, we are either creating public services in a more efficient way, bettering them by using emerging technologies, and also seeing how we can develop our workforce, a much better future-facing workforce, which is compliant and educated to use some of these emerging technologies. And that takes us to the last, but not the least, that is developing AI education programs across for all the state employees. So really, this AI program hinges on these three key initiatives. And the first initiative for a governance framework is exactly kind of like where this advisory council comes in place. So this advisory council comprises 15 members, members from the governor's office, the state agency CIOs, educational organizations like Georgia Tech, University of North Georgia, Georgia State, representation from private sector, and nonprofit. So we're really, really honored and lucky to have all of you collaborate and share your expertise to make sure that our AI program also, kind of progresses as things are changing across in the overall AI ecosystem. So let me talk about some of the work that has been happening as part of this program already. This is the first public meeting. This council meets every month, and we work through a lot of the things that we progress. And at every quarter, we have a public meeting to report out all the work that already has been done. So something that was already put in place before this council was put together was an AI policy, responsible use policy, and a responsible use standard. Now, this was a very kind of high level policy and a standard that was put in place to be more time sensitive, because at that point, AI was taken off and we were worried and we were concerned about the usage of AI that was probably not something that the state was aware of. So we wanted to make sure that anyone within the state who chooses to use any AI tools comply with the responsible use standard. We're very well aware that this is something that is going to be an ongoing standard, and we will be updating it and changing it as things progress and as things change. The next set of deliverables as part of documents that we'll be working on, which some of them already have started working on, is the first one is an AI terminology / glossary. Now, this is something that we extensively use, especially around legislation earlier this year. And, we have added what we think are really the most used descriptions and just keywords that are used within the AI conversation set. So I think, it's very important to kind of be on the same page as far as like, what is it that we understand if we say a certain terminology. So this particular glossary is a ever evolving living document that we will be supporting and growing. The next thing that we are working on is an inventory of automated decision systems. So specifically, I really don't want to call it like AI systems, because it could be existing systems, but where somewhere AI is playing a small part or a medium part, but we do want to have an inventory of that. And that is something we are collaborating with our other teams and reaching out to make sure that we collect that information. That will give us a good idea of what our current footprint is for our AI systems. Third, last but not the least, an ethics DNA guide. So this is the collaboration between Dr. Rose Proctor, was part of our council, and Dr. Catharyn Baird, where we are working on ethics DNA. It's a statewide ethical leadership and decision-making guide for organizations, state organizations, or I also have heard some local government being really interested in having that. This is really where will be more of a policy meets actual tactical decisions before things are being implemented. And I'm equally eager to hear Dr. Proctor and Dr. Baird talk about this towards the later part of this meeting. Then we move to the tactical piece of the program, which is the Innovation Lab. The Innovation Lab, as you all can imagine, truly is going to be a physical space, also a virtual space, because as we all know, we can proceed with work being done in both spaces. So wherever needed, we will meet in a physical space, which is now focused and and dedicated for this particular effort, the Georgia Innovation Lab. It will be built and made ready in the coming months, and will be hosted right here on the premise at the building where GTA offices are, which is 47 Trinity. This space really will be a collaboration space for agencies and our private sector vendors to come together and address certain use cases, certain problem areas that agencies are experiencing. But the focus will be on innovation. The focus truly will be on identifying the problem and then solving it, truly focused on the problem. We are really not focusing on just looking at what tools are out there and how can we fit those tools within our environment. This is truly going to be a problem-facing effort. So for that, we have to make sure that we have the right selected vendor partners who are going to be willing to work with our state agencies. And for that, GTA is going to be issuing a request for qualified contractors pretty soon. And we are working on it. We are working on the details of it at this point. So we are expecting that to release within a matter of weeks. And we will be then qualifying or rather pre-qualifying certain partners. And once we have that pool identified, we will be then working with agencies to surface some of these use cases that we will be sharing with some of these vendors, and then we'll be seeing what would be a good solution to those use cases. We may have multiple solutions to a certain business problem, but that's exactly what the idea is going to be. It's like, what is the most appropriate problem solution to the certain problem? So for that, we will be setting up these partnerships going forward. Like I mentioned earlier, we didn't have to wait for this physical space to be put in place. We already have certain partnerships involved ongoing right now. These partnerships that I'm talking about now are absolutely pro bono, and some of these partnerships that have been established are really to kind of move the needle forward for what we have been planning to do as far as part of the AI program. So the first one I want to talk about is the Truist Center for Ethical Leadership. The Truist Center has really been a great partner in form of Dr. Rose Proctor, and ever since our first meeting on, we have been working closely on the ethics DNA guide that we'll be hearing later in a few minutes. So that was our very first partnership. The next one that we are working on is with Kyndryl, who is a Microsoft partner and is actually working on a Microsoft grant for them to make sure that organizations who intend to use Microsoft products, they use certain grant sum that is offered by Microsoft, but also we have access to their experts and Microsoft employees. So we are assessing our organizational readiness for autopilot tools going forward, something like Copilot or something similar. But for that, we have to make sure as an organization, as a data-driven organization, we are ready for it. The third I want to talk about is Paragon Policy Fellowship. These are fellows from Georgia Tech, UPenn, UGA, Emory, Chapel Hill. This particular nonprofit offers this exciting opportunity for grad students or doctorate students who are studying public policy. And we are working with them to make sure that we also have some input from the younger generation in how we are setting some of our policies, especially around Gen AI. Last but not the least, the TELI, T-E-L-I organization out of the Aspen Policy Hub is a partnership that we're working on, and they have worked with one of our state agencies in grooming one of the use cases that they had in creating organizational efficiencies and also advocating for certain changes in their procedures and some future-facing tools to be implemented. So this was a great project that came out of that partnership. And as we get close to implementation, I'll be happy to share more around that. So these are some of the partnerships that are established with our existing partners and the lab. What we are working going forward is that each of the council members bring such a wealth of knowledge and experience in their specific domain. So we will be working with them in a group setting to focus on some specific policy making, some specific standards where we could leverage their expertise and create some robust governance framework. So we are creating working groups, and we have identified certain focus areas, and these working groups will be then, going forward, working within that group, and at some point we'll come together and share our progress. But to talk more about this working group, I'm going to invite Donna Sumner, our project manager, who has been leading this particular effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikhil. For those of you who haven't joined the last meeting where we started talking about the working groups, just a quick summary, like Nikhil was mentioning, we're putting these groups together as part of kind of the governance responsibilities of this council. So the topics there are on your screen: Gen AI, procurement of AI tools and partners, data privacy as it pertains to AI, ethics, as we've alluded to already, and then overseeing a training program that Nikhil first mentioned at the beginning of this meeting for state employees. So from a status perspective, I want to just thank the council members who have agreed to participate on certain groups. We're still awaiting a couple of confirmations, but once we get all of that nailed down, we're going to start sending out meeting invitations. The expectation is that we'll be working through, in these individual groups, working through the standards and guidelines throughout the month of July, with the hope being that we can turn those over by the end of the summer and get those started working through the GTA process to make them official standards, guidelines, and policies for the state. The generative AI, I did want to mention, is a little bit behind the other groups. We'll be working on those other 4 groups first. The Gen AI group is lagging only because it's already a work in progress with one of the partners that Nikhil just mentioned, the Paragon group. Once they finish their initial work, they're going to submit that, present it to us, and then the council members can pick it up and take it from there to further review and refine it and send it then through the GTA process. So in July, we're expecting to get the procurement group, the data privacy, and the training groups together. And as we already know, Doctors Procter and Baird have already taken a really good leap through the ethics work, which I think we're going to present next. So maybe we'll hand that back to Nikhil and let Rose and Catharyn speak.
Thank you so much, Donna. So yeah, without further ado, let me invite Dr. Rose Procter and Dr. Catharyn Baird. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing, and I think one of you will pull up the slide deck.
Yes, thank you, Nikhil. Good afternoon, everybody. While Dr. Baird is preparing the slides and sharing those, my name is Rose Procter. I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director for the Truist Center for Ethical Leadership. As Nikhil mentioned, we are housed within the University of North Georgia. We're also the referred center for the University System of Georgia on ethics and ethics education. And I also get the honor of serving as the Associate Director for ethics compliance for the University System of Georgia. So all 26 institutions, including UNG. We're really excited about this initiative. As Nikhil mentioned, early on, this is a really complex topic, right, around advanced and emerging technologies, including generative AI, but many other technologies as well. And our role and focus is really around the ethical considerations. We've come to know that everyone talks about the importance of ethics, but underneath that of actually how to tactically, and practically apply that every day as we're making decisions on behalf of our state organizations, which ultimately are on behalf of our citizens in Georgia. We want to make sure we're thinking critically and ethically through different perspectives before we implement or procure these products and put them out for use in the state of Georgia. So there's a lot of opportunity and excitement that I think that can add a lot of value, but there's also, as Nikhil mentioned, a lot of guardrails, a lot of ethical considerations and critical thinking to put in place. So I'm really excited about the work that we're doing inside the Truist Center. We've had a strategic partnership alongside Ethics Game that's headquartered in Colorado for over 10 years now around ethics education. And Dr. Catharyn Baird, their CEO and founder, also a JD, been in higher education, worked with, both education, government, and the private sector around ethics education, and particularly has delved into a lot of space around technology and AI, is on our strategic team in developing the ethics DNA, that guide. And then we'll work closely with the working group on the training program as far as training employees around ethical aspects of emerging technologies as well. So in the sense of time, I want to turn it over to Dr. Catharyn Baird. She's going to kind of present our co-work and just kind of give you an idea and sense of how we're approaching it, where we're at, and then hopefully we'll be able to open it up for some discussion or some questions. There's a lot more to come, but at least we'll give you a starting point. So Catharyn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rose. And thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to work with the state of Georgia. As I alluded to earlier on, this is calling me back to the years I worked with the Colorado Secretary of State's office in elections. And so you're going to find that a lot of my examples come out of elections law, which of course in Georgia is an interesting conversation. But I work and have worked for my 40 years of ethics and applied ethics. How do we take the big principles, the big concepts, and move them so ordinary people can use them in everyday life? And so that's what is going to be the focus of what we do to get today. As we begin to think about AI, and the conversation has gone mainstream, we have people who are very excited about AI and people who are very worried about AI. And so as we think about putting together guidelines and structures and educational programs, we have to have both of those poles, if you will, both of those constituents as part of the conversation. Ethics is about translating values into behaviors. And as we begin working with putting together the guide, the ultimate end game is how do we guide people throughout every level of the organization into having behaviors that match with and are part of their own agency's missions and values. So it's always about the specific behaviors that are acceptable within a culture, within the context. As we begin to work with this, we really have to understand that we are in uncharted waters. We don't have years of experience in working with emerging technologies. So one of the questions that we have, especially as Nikhil said, with the rapid deployment of generative AI, how do we evaluate the human impact, the ethics of those technologies? And that will be part of the questions that we ask. The next part we want to make sure is that stakeholders are engaged in the creation of the content. We have what we call a free moral space, which is there's a range of behaviors that are perfectly acceptable for people to use and to do that need to be identified. And then, as both Rose and Nikhil said, we have guardrails where we're now getting into areas where you need to be cautious. We pay attention to ethical blind spots. We pay attention to what is existing rules. And that's where we create meaningful guidelines for both clarity and accountability. Now, the piece that is true is all of ethics flow from mission. And I asked Rose, I said, so where would you find the mission for the state of Georgia? And she gave me a really quizzical look. And so I decided that we go to the preamble: promote justice, ensure justice, preserve peace, interests of citizen and the family, and posterity. And it was interesting when I then went to the Georgia Technology Authority that you see those values restated on both the slide that Nikhil had, but front and center. So one of our first projects was to do a survey of the 128 agencies in the state of Georgia to see how many of them have missions, visions, or values on their website. And around 38 have no reference whatsoever to any of that. And so part of the project is going to be for each of those agencies to take a look at what it is that they value, how do they nest within the overall state of Georgia mission and mission projects. We also want to be able to equip people to become moral influencers. This is not just about following the rules and sort of begrudgingly living into those, but really learning the tools of persuasion. How do we, at the team level? How do we at the agency level, at the various working groups, engage in conversations to explore and determine behaviors? We also have personal and organizational power, and this is where, as we build out the layers of the guide, we will invite people to use their existing power in order to enforce. And then, of course, you have to allocate money and personnel to build that culture. Ethics education often gets a glaring sort of yawn from people, and so our task is to make it engaging, make it interactive, so that people can, in fact, feel like they are participants in shaping the ethical culture as it applies to technology. Now, Rose came up with the ethics DNA idea, which we have just adored. And so what we see with DNA is that there are 4 layers of molecules that hold it together. And in ethics, we have 4 different places that we pay attention to. We start off with everyday experience. What is our experience with technology? What is our experience with AI? How does that work at an individual level, where we have early adopters who are looking at everything, and then we have people who are terrified of anything? How do we begin to play with that? What are the community expectations and community uses? And then how do we use our reason, our minds, to apply timeless ethical principles into this particular technology? The binding together are the norms that come out of them. And these norms are in conversation. So within an organization, individuals will be in conversation with their organizations about how to harmonize their individual ethical values around technology with the organizational ones. And then as larger organizations, they have to fit within the community norms. Everything in the Georgia mission statement has to do with supporting the citizen. And you all are very aware that citizens have a range of capability when it comes to technologies, even some of the very basic technologies that many of us take for granted. The spiral in a DNA protects it from disintegration. And one of the things that we pay attention to in ethics education is bias. We have bias that is at an individual level, that's at an organization level, and there's a lot of bias that's built into generative AI as a whole. Generative AI can only be created out of what people put into it. And so one of the pieces that we pay attention to is what are the kinds of biases that are built into this tool itself. And so we will have strategies in place to mitigate, to watch for, and then correct for that bias. And so this will be the ongoing metaphor that we use as we build out this training program. I found this slide, or found this graph in the Washington Post, and I thought it was really intriguing because there's a whole range of differences about how we name these emerging technologies. And that, again, is going to be part of the responsibility of the authority as we begin to say, as Nikhil said, we've got technologies that may not necessarily be AI, but are still being implemented and being used, that still have to pay attention to how either the nascent AI is being used or the technology itself. And so we're going to be focusing on what we call emerging technologies, and that will be any time an agency adopts a new technology, what are the kind of ethical considerations that need to be brought to the fore as we move forward. So what are our assumptions? In the industry, or in the world of ethics, we have 2 approaches. We have ethics taking, where you recognize and follow accepted norms. But in the world of AI and technology, we also have what we call ethics making. And this is where groups together use their imagination to determine the ethical boundaries in new contexts. Rose and I played a little bit as we were getting ready for the meeting about what would the prompt be for a public service announcement around getting someone ready to vote. Beautiful things came up. And the question that I then asked is said, if I were a staffer writing that PSA, what resources would I have available? Would I have a file of previous PSAs? The answer, by the way, is yes. Would I then be having examples? How is this technology the same or different from what we're already using? So that's going to be a framework that we're going to be using. What do you use already to do this work? How is this AI supporting it or not? And what is your level of expertise in testing it to make sure that it is accurate? The next piece that is going to be a very important part of what we do is what I call a human affirming approach. Now, I know Nikhil is part of these conversations, and I don't know how many other people are getting all excited about what the ranges are of AI in terms of what we call consciousness, in terms of what we call human characteristics. Out in the world of academics that I live in, it's a really hot topic. Most people just sort of look and say, let's not go there. But what we're going to do in our guide is to make sure that we focus on what it means to be human. And one of the things it means is that you are a human being worthy of respect and service. Where that translates into agency work is discerning, does someone need information which we can provide in electronic format, or does somebody need help where a human being is going to be necessary to intervene and to support? Where are those places where we need to pay attention? Creative, how do you use your expertise and skill to solve the problem? So when I brought up the PSA in elections, I know enough about what needs to go out for elections that I can use my expertise to judge the accuracy, the efficacy of that particular communication. If I don't know anything, I would be misled by the stuff that AI makes up. I might be misled by something else that's going on. And I also may have a new approach that comes out of my creativity. We really want to make sure that people throughout the organization have their expertise and skill validated and brought forward. We want to be engaged. We want employees to not outsource what we say, their human creativity. And we want citizens to be able to be engaged with the technology as well, where it's not so complex they can't use it, or it's so foreign that they don't know what to do with it. As we begin to be a human, we also want to be ethically courageous. Every human being makes a difference in what they do. Every human being has the opportunity to be held accountable for how they shape their lives, their meaning and value within the context of their work and within their context of their engagement with Georgia's citizens. So currently, we are going to be building a guide that has mission, vision, values, focus to support keeping the citizen in mind. We're going to focus on teaching a process and laying out a process to asking the right questions. As each of these new technologies come into the forefront, whether at the authority level or at an agency level, we want to have a set of questions that will focus people on how is the human impact being determined. We're going to tailor them from each level of an agency. We move from the very high level of the authority to give a sort of a broad imprimatur, if you will, or validation for it, all the way down to the person on the front desk, the person who is implementing it, the person who is making sure that the website is working. And so each of those different levels have a different set of questions because they have different focus and different stakeholders. And then finally, we'll have it laid out so you've got an overview for quick access, but we'll also have sufficient depth that people who want the deeper dive into what we were thinking to take a look at, the grounding for this approach will have that information. We're going to look to you all for guidance in how deep of a dive we need to go, because I love to go very deep, and we don't want to make it so that it's not accessible so people can't understand it. So as we move into this, we're going to take a values-based approach to our ethics guide. We're going to look at the values and ethical criteria at various ethical set points. My own research has demonstrated that within our community broadly, we have 4 different ethical set points, 4 different ways that we approach determining what behaviors are acceptable in community. And so we'll work with this within that framework to help people understand how to work with each other differently. The language will be very specific to ethical concerns within the AI context. What I have learned from doing this work for many years is that people appreciate having the dots connected between the abstract concepts and their very specific field. As we said before, the process is going to be to have a set of questions that the people have to ask. Again, we don't have all the answers. We cannot do the answers for rapidly emerging Gen AI. And so we want to have a set of evergreen questions that can be applied over the next several years without having to revisit this every time. The end goal is always to build courage and confidence with the people who are using, implementing, and deploying the technologies. What I know from my work with Rose is that if you can explain why you're doing what you're doing, and you can address the ethical concerns that people have about why, for example, in this particular context, privacy is more important than transparency, or whether having some limited access is more important than having the whole world know everything. It builds the confidence to act, and it gives them a grounding for explaining their decisions. Everything we do, however, is related. Everything we do is interconnected. So we want to make sure that as we build out the guide, we address division leaders who have to evaluate and deploy the technology. We want to give sufficient direction to the various programmers. Again, questions about how they write the code and the interface. And having worked a great deal with interface with a lot of different universities, the differences of my technology talking to your technology and harmonizing that within a system is more than a notion. One of the things that Rose has heard back from administrators is that they have a very limited time to evaluate an emerging system. So one of the visions that we have is that we will have an ethics checklist, if you will, that as someone is sending up a request for purchase, wherever that may go, that they will validate that they have thought through these ethical concerns and here's how they are addressed. We will then have training for the people using the technologies to make sure that they are doing it appropriately. And this is one where we really will be paying attention to folks who will go on their own into the technologies that have not come through the system and bring them in and really try to give some guidelines into how those technologies should be brought in. And then the ultimate question is, how do we work with those interfacing with the technologies? How do we make sure that those who are interfacing get the information they need with ease, and they are given accurate information, their information is appropriate, is private, and that we keep their needs front and center. I was working with my granddaughter on one of the technologies that is very popular at the university level, and she was talking about how they could go into, it's called Grammarly, and have their grammars checked. And I said, so is your technology and everything you put into Grammarly going anywhere? And she said, oh no, I think it's confidential. We looked down 3 layers and everything you put into that tool goes into the large language model and into the MAW, and there is no privacy, there is no copyright, there is nothing. And so as we work with these technologies, we want to make sure we educate internal and external people about where their information goes, what's private, what's not. So at the end of the day, I believe that small acts of moral courage or cowardice shape the direction of our lives and the lives that will work together. It's a real honor to work with a government agency whose work it is to make sure that the citizens of their state are equipped to access the various agencies well, effectively, and efficiently. It is often within agencies that people who are working there feel like their lives don't make a difference. And so part of what we also want to do is to make sure in this guide that people at every level of the organization, every level of the agencies understand that the way that they approach the technology, the way that they interact with the citizen and each other makes a difference in their lives and the lives of others. So that's where we are sitting right now. It's clearly a work in progress, and I will then turn it back to Nikhil, who can begin to take a look at any questions or comments or thoughts you might have in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baird. This was fantastic. Before I move to the comments piece, I'm just wondering if anyone on the council has any questions for either Dr. Baird or Rose. Yes, Brent.
I have a question. Thank you for presenting that. That was quite excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I was very busy taking notes. How do we balance the identification of areas where we're going to run into biases and privacy issues, and making sure that we're preventing that from happening both internally and with citizens, and balance that with the need of quickly identifying areas where those are not concerns and making sure that we're empowering people to start leveraging the technologies as soon as possible.
Right. So the notion of the questions that are asked would be that would actually be one of the questions that is asked. Is this a situation where we need to slow down a minute and really think through what we're doing? Or are we convinced that it is similar enough to other things that we have done, that it is similar enough to either a existing technology that we can move ahead? And what Rose and I have done in working with people is when we do face-to-face trainings with those at the higher level of organizations, we look to them to put together a series of guidelines themselves. What would you think is appropriate? What do you think would work? That then get brought into the lower levels. But you're exactly right. There are technologies that are similar enough to what we're already doing that they don't have to have a real deep dive into considerations, and others where you need to be slow. And there'll be some guidelines for that and questions to be asked in that discernment process.
Yeah, and Brent, to your point, you don't want people just spending all this time critically thinking about things that don't really need that level of thought. Although I would say almost everything we do takes ethical considerations and thoughts. But you're right, there are many things that at the front side of that checklist, as Catherine said, the questions are going to kind of guide them on how far, down the rabbit hole you need to go before you make a decision. And some of them will be very quick and simple. And I think for the administrators, the checklist will be easy. It's very easy to see this software or this technology. But for the ones that come across their desk that aren't simple, that are going to take a lot more ethical thought. So I know Nikhil and I have talked about just even universities, accepting robotic deliveries on their campuses. On the surface, that sounds easy, right? In the sense that Grubhub can put some food in it and send it across your campus and deliver it to one of your students. But there's a lot of other considerations. Some of those have financial data stored on them. We're hoping and working with vendors to make sure that it's a transfer through and not a storage. But the unfortunate truth is that's not the accurate truth for some of the vendors. And so if you've got a mobile device that has financial data and you've permitted it to be on your campus and that's stolen from your campus because you can literally pick it up, what does that mean for the administration? So there are just new things coming. Some of them will be really easy. And some of them will be complex. And I think that's true now in our procurement and our contracts. But I think the difference, to Catheryn's point, is that administrators don't maybe have all the deep dive, as Catheryn said, going deep into these areas because they're running our agencies. They're busy. They've got a lot of moving parts. I know for the USG, Chancellor Perdue and Teresa McCartney are very busy, but yet they're who has to sign the approval that we're going to adopt that and purchase that on behalf of the USG. So we want them to know, Brent, to your point of, hey, here were all the questions. These didn't need to be answered. And maybe they say, I think this question does need to be answered before we move forward to procurement. So we're going to try and put that guide in their hands.
The other thing that we're going to really depend on you guys doing and this group doing is where can there be centers of validation. So for example, the authority could say, okay, we have looked at this technology. We've asked these questions already. You guys don't have to bother with it. It's already been asked and answered. And so to the degree that there are places within the state that can put a stamp of approval on, if you will, a vendor or a process, then again, it will make it easier as it moves on down. And that needs to be both directions. So if you've got somebody at the bottom at an agency level who finds a really cool new technology, how does that filter up? I got an email from one of my professional groups that identified 250 AI tools available for social scientists doing research in my field. I had no idea there are 250 AI tools out there. And so the question becomes who at the authority level would be the one to vet them, to say this is good, this is not good, and hopefully that chain can be built in as well. By the way, that list is only going to grow as you have all these entrepreneurs out there, each trying their own bell and whistle to get on the AI bandwagon.
And some of them taking things into ethical consideration and some of them not, including some of them deliberately not.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. There are probably 5 tools launched ever since the start of this council meeting.
Yeah.
if we don't have any questions from the council members, let me jump to the public discussion. Yen, I'll hand it over to you, just in case anyone who has logged in.
I don't see any, Nikhil.
Okay.
So if you're good, we can wrap up the meeting, or if you had did you have another item after this?
I don't have any particular,
Okay.
I think it's important, probably to mention that we had talked that now that we have these working groups put in place, we probably will skip the July meeting because we'll be heads down working on all the topics that have been shared. And again, Yen and Donna will follow up with some of you who still have not confirmed or are still wondering, which one is more appropriate as a work group for you to participate. So we'll finalize that, but we really want to kind of have July as the heads down focus month to work through that, and then we'll reconvene back in August. I just want to see if Shanzia has any last words. If not, then we can wrap.
I just want to say, if there are any questions right now, which you do have later, email me or Nikhil, and they'll get those questions answered for you. If not, I guess we'll see you in August.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you,
Sean. Thank you, everyone.
Procter and Dr. Baird, great presentation. So thank y'all.
thank you,
That was really great. Thank you so much.
Enjoy. Thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.